Captain Marcus Darrow stood resolute on the bridge of the UEF Vanguard, the pinnacle of human ingenuity and hope, as it drifted silently in the vast shadow of Jupiter. For years, humanity had cast its gaze into the cosmos, yearning for a sign, a whisper from the stars that they were not alone. Now, that whisper had become a thunderous reality. Out of the inky void, 5 alien ships materialized, their surfaces alive with strange, pulsating patterns of light that danced across their hulls like living constellations. The air on the bridge was thick with anticipation and unspoken dread. Lieutenant Illyra Voss, her voice a calm anchor amidst the rising tide of anxiety, announced, "Captain, they're hailing us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the unknown. The main screen flickered, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the faces of the crew. Before them appeared the Galactic Concord, a triad of alien species that commanded the allegiance of countless worlds. At the center stood Chancellor Zyrek, his skin a deep azure, his features elongated and otherworldly, eyes as black and profound as the depths of space. Flanking him were the Krivix ambassador, its insectoid form a twitching mass of chitin and antennae, and the Dretharn general, whose reptilian gaze was as cold and unyielding as stone. "Greetings, humans," Zyrek intoned, his voice smooth and practiced, each word perfectly enunciated. "We welcome you to the galactic community. However, as a young and undeveloped species, you will be granted the status of a protected world. Your resources and development will be overseen by the Concord." A chill ran through the bridge. Captain Darrow's brow furrowed, a storm gathering in his eyes. "Protected," he echoed, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. "We came seeking partnership, not subjugation." The Dretharn general's hiss cut through the tension like a blade. "You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation." As the exchange unfolded, Dr. Rena Solis, the Vanguard's lead scientist, worked feverishly at her console. Her fingers danced over the controls, decrypting a stream of alien communications. What she discovered sent a shiver down her spine. The Concord viewed Earth not as an equal, but as a treasure trove to be plundered, its people mere resources to be exploited. Realizing the peril, Captain Darrow made a fateful decision. "Prepare to withdraw," he commanded, his voice a lifeline of authority amidst the chaos. But the aliens had anticipated this. With a suddenness that stole the breath from the room, the alien ships unleashed a barrage of fire. The Vanguard shuddered violently, its defenses crumbling under the onslaught of alien technology far beyond human comprehension. In the midst of the destruction, Rena and Lieutenant Voss acted swiftly. They boarded a small shuttle, the craft a fragile cocoon of hope against the vast, uncaring darkness of space. As they launched into the void, the Vanguard behind them was consumed by fire and light, a dying star in the endless night. Clutching the data that could alter the destiny of their world, Rena and Voss hurtled towards Earth, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead and the determination to ensure that humanity would not face it alone. The destruction of the Vanguard reverberated across Earth like a thunderclap in a silent room. News of humanity's first encounter with alien life and its catastrophic conclusion spread like wildfire. Fear gripped the hearts of billions. For the first time in history, humanity was forced to confront an undeniable truth: they were no longer alone, and the universe was not a place of welcome. It was a place of predators. Cities fell silent as people stared up at the stars, no longer seeing infinite possibility but an endless void of danger. Yet, amidst the fear, there was resolve. The nations of Earth, fractured and divided for centuries, set aside their differences. Flags were lowered, replaced by the symbol of the United Earth Federation, UEF, a coalition forged in desperation and hope. Resources were pooled, minds united, and humanity began to prepare not to surrender, but to fight. Far from Earth, on the cold, desolate surface of Luna, a hidden facility buzzed with activity. Beneath the endless gray dust of the moon, Dr. Elias Corrin worked tirelessly, his mind aflame with ideas born of necessity and terror. The scientist was a man of quiet brilliance, his dark eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. He knew that humanity's survival depended on innovation, on finding a way to outthink an enemy that outmatched them in every conceivable way. It was during one of these long, sleepless nights that Corrin made his breakthrough. His research into dark matter, a force so elusive it was almost mythical, finally bore fruit. By manipulating this enigmatic substance, he discovered a way to shift objects out of normal space, rendering them intangible, untouchable. It was as if they could slip between the cracks of reality itself. Corrin's discovery ignited a spark of hope. The UEF immediately began constructing a new fleet, one unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. At the heart of this fleet was the first prototype, the UEF Spectre. The Spectre was a ship born of shadows. Its hull was a deep, matte black that seemed to devour light, leaving it almost invisible against the void of space. Its design was sleek and predatory, exuding a quiet menace that sent shivers down the spine of those who gazed upon it. But its true power lay within, the dark matter drive, a miraculous piece of technology that allowed the Spectre to phase through physical matter as though it were a ghost. When the time came for the Spectre's maiden voyage, Commander Arlen Vela stood before his crew, his voice steady and unyielding. Vela was a man of action, his sharp features and piercing eyes reflecting the weight of the moment. "This ship isn't just a weapon," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "It's a declaration. Humanity will not be prey." The crew, a hand-picked team of Earth's finest, nodded in solemn agreement. They knew the stakes. They knew what failure meant. The Spectre launched into the void, its engines humming with an otherworldly energy. As it approached an asteroid field, the crew braced themselves. This was the first true test of the dark matter drive. With a command from Vela, the ship activated its phasing technology. For a moment, reality itself seemed to ripple. The Spectre shimmered, its edges blurring as it slipped into a state between existence and non-existence. The asteroids loomed ahead, jagged and unyielding, but the Spectre passed through them as if they were nothing more than shadows. The crew watched in awe as the massive rocks phased harmlessly through the ship, their jagged edges gliding through the hull without leaving so much as a scratch. But the Spectre was not just a defensive marvel. It was a weapon. As the ship emerged from the asteroid field, Commander Vela gave the order to fire the Void Lance, a weapon powered by the same dark matter technology. The Void Lance was a thing of terrible beauty. A beam of shimmering energy erupted from the Spectre, its light bending and twisting unnaturally as it raced toward its target. When it struck, the asteroid did not explode in a burst of fire and debris. Instead, it seemed to unravel, its very structure destabilizing at the molecular level. In seconds, the massive rock dissolved into a cloud of dust and particles, scattered to the winds of space. The crew of the Spectre erupted into cheers, their voices filled with a mix of relief and triumph. For the first time since the destruction of the Vanguard, they felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. Humanity had found its edge. The Spectre was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a promise that humanity would not cower in the face of the unknown. They would rise, they would fight, and they would carve their place among the stars. The invasion began without warning. In the cold silence of space, over 300 alien warships descended upon the solar system like a swarm of locusts, their sleek, menacing forms blotting out the distant starlight. The Galactic Concord had come, their arrival a storm of malice and power. At the head of this vast fleet stood Supreme Commander Rithik, a Dretharn whose name was spoken with fear across the galaxy. His scaled visage was a mask of cruelty, his yellow, slitted eyes gleaming with the cold satisfaction of a predator closing in on its prey. From his command ship, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons that hummed with lethal energy, Rithik gazed at the distant blue orb of Earth. "They will kneel," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Or they will burn." The human fleet, a patchwork of conventional warships hastily assembled over the years, met the Concorde near Saturn. The battle began as a symphony of destruction. Earth's ships, though brave, were hopelessly outmatched. Streams of plasma fire and energy blasts lit up the void, painting the blackness of space with violent colors. Human frigates and cruisers were torn apart in seconds, their shattered hulls spinning lifelessly into the abyss. On board the Concorde flagship, Rithik watched the carnage unfold with grim satisfaction. "Primitive creatures," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "They were never a threat. This is not war, it is extermination." As the last of Earth's conventional fleet faltered, the Concorde ships began to close in, preparing for the final blow. Rithik leaned forward, his clawed hand resting on the edge of his command console, eager to see the end of this so-called resistance. But then, the void shifted. From the shadows of the asteroid belt, they came. 12 ships, their matte black hulls shimmering with an ethereal blue glow, emerged like wraiths from the darkness. They moved with an unnatural grace, their forms barely visible against the starry backdrop, as though carved from the void itself. At their head was the UEF Spectre, its presence a silent promise of vengeance. The bridge of the Spectre was bathed in dim, cold light, the only sound the steady hum of the dark matter drive. Admiral Kale Rhine stood at the center, his tall, imposing figure radiating calm authority. His sharp features were set in a mask of determination, his piercing gaze fixed on the enemy fleet ahead. "Engage the enemy," Rhine commanded, his voice steady and resolute. "Show them what humanity is capable of." The Phantom fleet surged forward, their ships phasing in and out of reality with ghostly precision. The Concorde forces, confident in their overwhelming power, opened fire. But their weapons passed harmlessly through the phased human ships, the energy beams dissipating into empty space as if the Phantom fleet were nothing more than illusions. Panic rippled through the Concorde armada. Rithik's sneer faltered as he watched his fleet's weapons fail to connect. "What is this trickery?" he growled, his claws digging into the armrest of his command chair. The Phantom fleet struck back with ruthless efficiency. The Spectre's void lance fired first, a beam of shimmering blue energy that twisted unnaturally as it tore through one of the Concorde's dreadnoughts. The massive ship didn't explode in a blaze of fire, instead, it unraveled, its structure collapsing into a cloud of dust and debris as if it had been consumed by the void itself. One by one, the Concorde ships fell. The Phantom fleet moved like predators in the night, phasing through enemy vessels to strike at their most vulnerable points. Their dark matter weapons destabilized the alien ships at a molecular level, reducing them to nothingness with surgical precision. Rithik's composure crumbled as chaos engulfed his fleet. "Regroup," he bellowed, his voice a mix of rage and desperation. "Focus fire on their lead ship." But it was too late. The Phantom fleet had already unleashed their second wave. Strike teams, clad in sleek dark matter suits that shimmered like liquid shadow, boarded the Concorde's vessels. These teams moved like phantoms, their forms blurring as they phased through walls and bulkheads. The alien crews fought back, but their weapons were useless against enemies who could vanish and reappear at will. Inside one of the Concorde destroyers, Lieutenant Illyra Voss led her strike team through the dimly lit corridors. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wires and alien blood. Her dark matter suit clung to her like a second skin, its energy thrumming against her body. She moved with purpose, her pulse steady despite the chaos around her. Ahead, a group of Krivix soldiers blocked their path. The insectoid creatures hissed and raised their weapons, their mandibles clicking in unison. But before they could fire, Voss and her team phased through the walls, reappearing behind the aliens. In a flurry of motion, the strike team disabled the soldiers, their movements precise and deadly. "Plant the charges," Voss ordered, her voice calm despite the danger. Within minutes, the team had sabotaged the ship's core. As they phased back to their extraction point, the destroyer erupted in a silent explosion, its shattered remains drifting into the void. Back on the Spectre, Admiral Rhine watched as the Concorde fleet disintegrated. The once mighty armada was now a graveyard of twisted metal and fading light. On board his flagship, Rithik slammed his fist against the console, his fury boiling over. "Retreat," he roared, his voice echoing through the command deck. "Fall back." The remnants of the Concorde fleet fled, their once unshakable confidence shattered. Humanity, the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak, had proven them wrong. As the Phantom fleet regrouped, Admiral Rhine allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He looked out at the wreckage of the Concorde armada, his expression hard but triumphant. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, his voice low but resolute. "They wanted to see what humanity was capable of. Now they know." Above the ruins of Saturn's rings, the Phantom fleet stood as a testament to humanity's resilience and defiance. The message was clear: Earth would not fall. Not today. Not ever. Supreme Commander Rithik stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, his clawed hands trembling as the chaos unfolded before him. The once mighty Concorde fleet, a force that had crushed countless civilizations, was now in tatters. Ships that had been symbols of galactic dominance were reduced to drifting wreckage, their twisted hulls glinting faintly against the stars. Rithik's yellow eyes darted across the battlefield, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. "How is this possible?" he roared, slamming his fist against the console with enough force to crack the surface. His voice, usually cold and calculated, was now laced with panic. Their technology was primitive. They were nothing. But the truth was undeniable. The Phantom fleet had turned the tide, their ghostly ships moving with precision and fury, dismantling the Concorde armada piece by piece. Rithik's confidence, once unshakable, crumbled like the wreckage of his fleet. In the midst of the carnage, a single transmission cut through the chaos. It was a voice, calm yet commanding, and it echoed across every ship in the battlefield. Admiral Kale Rhine's words carried the weight of humanity's defiance, his tone sharp as a blade. "This is Earth's answer to your aggression," Rhine declared, his voice resonating like a storm in the silence of space. "Leave now, or face annihilation." The words struck Rithik like a physical blow. He had underestimated these humans, dismissed them as weak and insignificant. Now, he realized his arrogance had led him to the brink of ruin. The Concorde fleet began to retreat, their ships breaking formation and fleeing into the void. Rithik's officers scrambled to obey his orders, their movements frantic as they tried to salvage what remained of their forces. But before the flagship could escape, the Spectre emerged from the shadows, its black hull shimmering with an eerie blue light. The ship moved like a predator closing in on its prey, its presence suffocating and unrelenting. Rithik's flagship shuddered as boarding pods latched onto its hull, their sleek forms cutting through the metal like knives. The Supreme Commander's claws twitched as alarms blared across the bridge, the red lights casting ominous shadows on the walls. "They dare board my ship!" Rithik growled, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. But his words were drowned out by the sound of footsteps, human footsteps. The bridge doors slid open with a hiss, and Lieutenant Illyra Voss stepped into the room, her dark matter suit glinting faintly in the dim light. Her presence was commanding, her movements precise, and her gaze locked onto Rithik with an intensity that made even the seasoned Dretharn strategist falter. Voss had changed since the early days of the war. The fear she once carried had been replaced by cold resolve, her eyes sharp with the weight of experience. She was no longer just a soldier, she was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a warrior forged in the fires of conflict. "You called us primitive," she said, her voice steady and cold as ice. The words hung in the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. Rithik straightened, his scaled shoulders rising as he tried to summon the remnants of his pride. "You are insects," he spat, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You are nothing compared to the Concord." Voss took a step closer, her movements slow and deliberate. The bridge crew watched in silence, their alien faces etched with fear as the human operative confronted their commander. "Let me show you how wrong you were," Voss replied, her tone sharp and unyielding. Before Rithik could respond, Voss raised her weapon, a sleek, dark matter blade that shimmered like liquid shadow. With a single motion, she activated the blade, its edge humming with energy. The Dretharn commander flinched, his bravado crumbling as the humans closed in around him. Voss didn't strike. Instead, she allowed the weight of her words to crush him, her presence a reminder of the power humanity had unleashed. Rithik's defeat was not just physical, it was psychological. The Supreme Commander, once feared across the galaxy, now stood powerless in the face of the species he had so arrogantly dismissed. As the Phantom Fleet secured the flagship, Voss turned to her team. "Take him alive," she ordered, her voice firm. "He'll answer for what he's done." Rithik's claws trembled as he was restrained, his pride shattered and his fleet destroyed. The humans had not just won the battle, they had sent a message to the galaxy. On the bridge of the Spectre, Admiral Rhine watched as the Concord forces retreated into the void, their ships vanishing one by one. The battlefield, once a scene of destruction and chaos, now stood silent, the wreckage of the Concord fleet floating lifelessly in the cold expanse of space. "This is only the beginning," Rhine murmured, his gaze fixed on the stars. "They thought they could break us. Now, they'll see what humanity is truly capable of." And as the Phantom Fleet regrouped, their ships glowing faintly against the darkness, the message was clear: humanity would not bow. They would rise, stronger than ever, and carve their place among the stars. Supreme Commander Rithik stood paralyzed on the bridge of his flagship, his towering frame rigid with disbelief. Around him, the once unassailable Concord fleet crumbled like an empire built on sand. The battlefield was a graveyard of shattered ships, their debris floating lifelessly in the void, illuminated by the cold light of distant stars. Rithik's golden, slitted eyes darted across the chaos, searching for some semblance of control, some shred of order, but there was none. "How is this possible?" he roared, his voice a guttural snarl that reverberated across the bridge. His clawed hand slammed against the console, cracking its surface as sparks flew from damaged circuits. The rage in his voice was undercut by the unmistakable tremor of fear. Their technology was primitive. They were nothing. But the truth was undeniable. The Phantom Fleet had emerged from the shadows like specters of vengeance, and their precision was devastating. Concord ships exploded silently in the vacuum of space, their mighty dreadnoughts collapsing under the weight of humanity's unrelenting assault. Rithik's confidence, once as unyielding as the steel of his flagship, was now a fragile shell, cracking with every human strike. Then, as if the universe itself conspired to shatter his pride, a voice echoed across the battlefield, a voice calm and resolute, yet sharp as a blade. It cut through the chaos, silencing the noise of destruction, and carried with it the weight of humanity's defiance. "This is Earth's answer to your aggression," Admiral Kale Rhine declared, his tone steady and commanding, each word a hammer blow to the Concorde's crumbling morale. "Leave now, or face annihilation." The words hung in the air like a judgment passed by the stars themselves. Rithik's claws flexed against the console, his fury boiling over, but he could not deny the truth. Humanity had risen from the ashes of their own vulnerability, and now they stood as a force the galaxy could no longer ignore. Across the battlefield, Concorde ships began to retreat. Their formations broke apart like fragments of glass, fleeing into the void in desperate attempts to escape the Phantom Fleet's wrath. Rithik's officers scrambled to obey his orders, their movements frantic as the flagship's systems flickered and alarms screamed. But before they could escape, the Spectre emerged from the shadows, its sleek black hull shimmering with an eerie blue glow. The ship moved with the grace of a predator closing in on wounded prey, its presence suffocating and unrelenting. Rithik's flagship shuddered as boarding pods latched onto its hull, their sharp edges cutting through the metal like knives slicing flesh. The Supreme Commander's breath caught in his throat as the bridge lights dimmed, casting long, ominous shadows across the room. "They dare board my ship!" Rithik growled, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew his power was slipping away. The bridge door slid open with a hiss, and Lieutenant Illyra Voss stepped into the room. Her dark matter suit clung to her like a second skin, its faint glow casting an ethereal aura around her figure. She moved with an unshakable confidence, her steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. Voss had become something more than human, a warrior forged in the fires of war, her resolve as unyielding as the void itself. Her sharp gaze locked onto Rithik, and for the first time, the Supreme Commander felt the weight of his arrogance bear down on him like a crushing tide. "You called us primitive," Voss said, her voice cold and steady, each word cutting through the tension like a blade. Rithik straightened, his scaled shoulders rising as he tried to summon the remnants of his pride. His yellow eyes gleamed with defiance, even as the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You are insects," he spat, his claws twitching at his sides. "You are nothing compared to the Concorde." Voss took another step forward, her movements slow and deliberate, her presence suffocating. The bridge crew watched in silence, their alien faces etched with fear as the human operative confronted their commander. "Let me show you how wrong you were," Voss replied, her tone sharp and unyielding. Before Rithik could respond, Voss raised her weapon, a sleek blade forged from dark matter, its edge shimmering like liquid shadow. The energy thrummed against the silence, its hum a promise of destruction. Rithik's bravado faltered, his claws trembling as he stared into the face of his defeat. But Voss didn't strike. Instead, she allowed the weight of her words to crush him, her presence a reminder of the power humanity had unleashed. Rithik's defeat was not just physical, it was psychological. The Supreme Commander, once feared across the galaxy, now stood powerless in the face of the species he had so arrogantly dismissed. As the Phantom Fleet secured the flagship, Voss turned to her team. "Take him alive," she ordered, her voice firm. "He'll answer for what he's done." Rithik's claws trembled as he was restrained, his pride shattered and his fleet destroyed. The humans had not just won the battle, they had sent a message to the galaxy. On board the Spectre, Admiral Rhine watched as the Concorde forces retreated into the void, their ships vanishing one by one. The battlefield, once a scene of destruction and chaos, now stood silent, the wreckage of the Concorde fleet floating lifelessly in the cold expanse of space. "This is only the beginning," Rhine murmured, his gaze fixed on the stars. "They thought they could break us. Now, they'll see what humanity is truly capable of." And as the Phantom fleet regrouped, their ships glowing faintly against the darkness, the message was clear: humanity would not bow. They would rise, stronger than ever, and carve their place among the stars. The news of the Concorde's defeat spread like wildfire, carried on whispers that became roars across the galaxy. For centuries, the Concorde had been an unshakable monolith, ruling with an iron hand and a shadow of fear that stretched across countless worlds. Their fleets were unstoppable, their laws unbreakable, and their punishments merciless. To resist the Concorde was to invite annihilation. But now, the unthinkable had happened. Humanity, a species once dismissed as insignificant, had struck a blow that shattered the illusion of the Concorde's invincibility. The Phantom fleet's victory became a beacon of hope, illuminating the darkest corners of the galaxy where oppression had reigned for generations. On countless worlds, those who had long suffered in silence began to rise. The oppressed, the forgotten, and the broken found their voices again. Rebellions erupted like storms, their fury unleashed against Concorde outposts and strongholds. The banners of the Concorde, once symbols of fear, were torn down and burned, their ashes scattered to the winds. On the capital world of Zareth, the heart of the Concorde's empire, chaos reigned. The city of Vorthul, with its towering spires of glass and steel, glimmered under the light of Zaretha's twin moons. Normally, the streets were silent, orderly, and tightly controlled by the Concorde's enforcers. Now, they were alive with unrest. Crowds of alien species filled the avenues, their voices raised in protest, their demands echoing through the city's corridors. Chancellor Zyrek stood in the grand chamber of the High Council, his claws digging into the armrests of his obsidian throne. His pale, translucent skin shimmered faintly under the chamber's cold light, betraying the tension coursing through him. The council hall, once a place of absolute authority, now felt like a crumbling fortress. Order must be maintained. Zyrek's voice, usually calm and commanding, cracked with desperation. His yellow, slit-pupil eyes scanned the faces of the council members, searching for loyalty, but finding only uncertainty and fear. The council, composed of representatives from the Concorde's member species, was fracturing. Delegates whispered among themselves, their voices laced with doubt and anger. The once unified body was now a battlefield of conflicting interests. Some demanded immediate reforms, others spoke of abandoning the Concorde entirely. Humanity's victory has emboldened the weak. Zyrek snarled, slamming his fist onto the table. We must crush these uprisings before they spread further. But his words fell on deaf ears. The council was no longer his to command. The member species, once bound by fear, now saw an opportunity to break free. The cracks in the Concorde's foundation were widening, and Zyrek could feel the empire slipping through his grasp like sand in a storm. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity extended a hand of friendship to those seeking liberation. The blue and green planet, once seen as a backwater world, now became a symbol of hope and unity. Messages were sent across the stars, not as declarations of conquest, but as invitations to join a new vision for the galaxy. Dr. Renaissau Lee stood in the center of the United Earth Alliance's chamber, her voice calm yet filled with conviction. Her presence was magnetic, her words carrying the weight of a species that had fought its way from the brink of extinction to the forefront of galactic history. "We don't seek to rule," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the room, as if addressing not just her audience, but the galaxy itself. "We seek to build a galaxy where all species can thrive. A galaxy where freedom is not a privilege, but a right. Where cooperation replaces conquest, and where no one lives in fear of oppression." Her words resonated far beyond the chamber walls. Across the galaxy, species that had once viewed humanity with suspicion now saw them as allies. Ambassadors from oppressed worlds arrived on Earth, seeking guidance and support. Humanity's victory had not only inspired rebellion, it had sparked a movement. But not all welcomed this new era. On Zareth, Chancellor Zyrek watched the growing unrest with a mix of fury and dread. Reports of uprisings flooded in from every corner of the Concord's territories. Outposts were falling, fleets were defecting, and entire worlds were declaring their independence. The empire he had spent his life serving was unraveling before his eyes. In his private chamber, Zyrek stared out at the city of Vorthul. The twin moons bathed the skyline in a pale, ghostly light, casting long shadows over the spires. Fires burned in the lower districts, their smoke rising like dark tendrils into the night sky. The distant sound of chanting reached his ears, a haunting reminder of the rebellion that was now at his doorstep. For the first time in centuries, the Concord's future was uncertain. The galaxy was changing, and humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as architects of a new era. And as the stars bore witness to the upheaval, one truth became clear: the age of the Concord was ending, and the galaxy was awakening to the promise of freedom. The void of space was silent, yet it carried the weight of an impending storm. At the edge of the solar system, where the sun's light dimmed and the stars loomed cold and distant, the remnants of the Concord gathered. Their fleet, though battered and diminished, still radiated menace, a testament to centuries of conquest and domination. At its heart was the Dread Spear, a monstrous flagship forged from obsidian-like alloys, its jagged hull bristling with weapons that pulsed with a faint crimson glow. Grand Marshal Krenvar stood on the bridge of the Dread Spear, his massive form clad in dark, spiked armor that seemed to absorb the faint light around him. His reptilian features were sharp and unforgiving, scaled skin the color of tarnished steel, eyes like molten gold, and a mouth lined with jagged teeth that gleamed as he spoke. "If we fall, we take them with us," Krenvar growled, his voice a deep rumble that reverberated through the bridge. His clawed hand gripped the hilt of his ceremonial blade, a relic of his Krivik's heritage. Around him, his officers, an assortment of alien species loyal to the Concord, nodded grimly. They knew this was a suicide mission, but Krenvar's resolve was unshakable. "Earth will burn," he continued, his golden eyes narrowing as he gazed at the holographic map of the solar system. "They think they've won. They think their victory has broken us. But they'll learn our wrath will be the last thing they see." The fleet began its advance, engines roaring to life as the Concord armada surged forward like a tide of darkness. Their destination, Earth, the cradle of humanity, the planet that had dared to defy the Concord and shatter their dominance. But humanity was ready. At the edge of the solar system, the Phantom Fleet lay in wait, their ships hidden within the shadows of asteroids and the faint glow of distant stars. The fleet was smaller than the Concord's, but it moved with a precision and unity that made it feel unstoppable. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering and ingenuity, their dark matter cores humming with an otherworldly energy that seemed to ripple through the void. Admiral Kale Rhine stood on the command deck of the Spectre, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the incoming enemy fleet. His face was calm, but his sharp blue eyes betrayed the intensity of his focus. Around him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, their movements synchronized as if they were extensions of the ship itself. "They're coming in fast," Lieutenant Voss reported, her voice steady but laced with tension. The holographic display before her flickered, showing the Concorde Armada closing in. "We're outnumbered 3-1. Ryan nodded, his gaze never leaving the display. "Numbers don't win battles," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Strategy does." He turned to his officers, his expression hardening. "Activate the anomaly generators. Let's give them a welcome they'll never forget." The Phantom fleet moved into position, their ships gliding through the void like predators stalking their prey. At Ryan's command, the dark matter technology aboard the fleet's vessels came to life. Invisible waves of energy rippled outward, distorting the very fabric of space. The Concorde fleet didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. As they crossed the threshold of the solar system, the enemy ships were caught in the gravitational anomaly. Space itself seemed to twist and ripple around them, the stars warping into elongated streaks of light. The ship's engines sputtered and failed, their trajectories spiraling into chaos as the anomaly trapped them in a pocket of warped space. On the Dread's pier, alarms blared, and the bridge lights flickered ominously. Krenvar's claws dug into the console as he snarled in frustration. "What is this?" he roared, his voice a mix of fury and disbelief. "Gravitational distortion detected," one of his officers stammered, their voice trembling. We're caught in some kind of spatial anomaly." Krenvar's golden eyes burned with rage as he slammed his fist onto the console. "Cowards! They hide behind their tricks and shadows. Fight through it. Destroy them." But there was no escape. The Phantom fleet struck with surgical precision, their ships emerging from the shadows like phantoms, their weapons slicing through the Concorde vessels with unrelenting efficiency. Explosions lit up the void as one by one, the Concorde ships were disabled or destroyed. The Dread's pier was the last to fall. The Spectre closed in, its sleek black hull gleaming faintly against the backdrop of the stars. A barrage of energy weapons disabled the Dread Spire's engines and shields, leaving the massive flagship adrift and vulnerable. On the bridge of the Spectre, Ryan watched as the Dread's pier floated helplessly in the anomaly's grip. He turned to Voss, his expression unreadable. "Board it," he ordered. "Bring Krenvar to me." The boarding party moved swiftly, their dark matter suits allowing them to navigate the zero-gravity environment with ease. Lieutenant Voss led the charge, her movements precise and fluid as she breached the Dread Spire's hull. The corridors of the flagship were dark and eerily silent, the only sound the faint hum of failing systems. They found Krenvar on the bridge, his massive form slumped in the command chair. His armor was scorched and battered, his golden eyes dim but still burning with defiance. When Voss approached, he bared his jagged teeth in a snarl. "You think this is over?" he growled, his voice a low rumble. "You think you've won? The Concorde will rise again. We are eternal." Voss stared at him, her expression cold and unyielding. "The Concorde is finished," she said, her voice steady. "Your reign of terror ends here." Krenvar let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and filled with rage. But he didn't resist as Voss signaled for him to be taken into custody. His defiance was all that remained of his once mighty empire. As the last of the Concorde vessels surrendered, the anomaly dissipated, and the void returned to its natural state. The battle was over, swift and decisive, and humanity had emerged victorious once again. Back on the Spectre, Ryan stood at the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The wreckage of the Concorde fleet drifted silently in the distance, a stark reminder of the price of arrogance and oppression. "This isn't just a victory," Rhine murmured, his gaze unwavering. "This is a new beginning. For us, and for the galaxy." And as the Phantom Fleet regrouped, their ships glowing faintly against the darkness, the message was clear: humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. They had not only survived, they had risen to become a force that could shape the destiny of the stars. The galaxy, once fractured by fear and oppression, now stood on the precipice of a new era. The Concorde, a symbol of tyranny for centuries, was no more. In its place, hope began to bloom, fragile yet radiant, like the first light of dawn breaking through the endless void. Earth, the unlikely spark of this revolution, now bore the responsibility of guiding the galaxy into a future free from the shadows of the past. The Stellar Accord was born from this hope. It was not merely a political agreement but a declaration of shared purpose, a promise between civilizations that had once been divided by distrust and conquest. Its charter was etched into a crystalline tablet, shimmering with the colors of 1,000 worlds. Among its principles was a vow to protect the vulnerable, to banish exploitation, and to ensure that no species would endure the suffering humanity had once faced. The signing ceremony took place on Lysera Prime, a planet chosen for its breathtaking beauty and neutral history. The skies above were a cascade of violet and gold, illuminated by the light of its 3 suns. Towering crystal spires stretched toward the heavens, their surfaces reflecting the gathered delegates below, a kaleidoscope of species, each unique in form, color, and voice. Commander Vela, a figure of quiet strength and unwavering resolve, stood at the center of the assembly. Her uniform was simple yet dignified, a reflection of her humility and purpose. Her pale silver skin seemed to glow in the soft light, and her violet eyes carried the weight of countless battles fought for freedom. As she stepped forward, the murmurs of the crowd fell silent, replaced by an almost sacred stillness. "Today," she began, her voice clear and steady, "we set aside fear and greed." Her words echoed across the plaza, carried by the wind and translated into dozens of languages. "For too long, we have allowed our differences to divide us. For too long, we have let the pursuit of power blind us to the truth." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "The truth is this: we are stronger together. No one species, no one world, can thrive alone. The stars belong to all of us, and it is our responsibility to protect them not as conquerors, but as stewards." A ripple of emotion passed through the assembly. Delegates from once oppressed worlds nodded, their expressions a mixture of hope and determination. Even those who had once served the Concorde felt the weight of her words, their shame tempered by the opportunity for redemption. Commander Vela raised her hand, gesturing toward the crystalline tablet. "This charter is more than words. It is a promise. A promise that we will stand together, not as enemies, but as allies. That we will protect the weak, uplift the struggling, and ensure that no voice is silenced." Her voice softened, but its conviction remained. "Let this be the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where unity replaces division, where compassion triumphs over cruelty. Together, we will chart a new course for the galaxy." As she stepped back, the crowd erupted into applause, a sound that resonated not just in the plaza, but across the stars. The Stellar Accord was signed, and with it, the galaxy took its first step toward a brighter future. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of light and shadow that promised both wonder and mystery. It was into this infinite expanse that the UEF Eclipse prepared to venture, a vessel unlike any other, born from the collective effort of the Stellar Accord's member civilizations. The eclipse was a symbol of unity, its sleek hull a fusion of human ingenuity and alien craftsmanship. Its design was both functional and beautiful, with flowing lines that seemed to echo the harmony of its creators. Its engines hummed softly, powered by a blend of technologies that represented the shared knowledge of dozens of worlds. On the bridge, Captain Lyra Kale stood at the helm, her presence commanding yet warm. She bore the legacy of her father, Admiral Rhine, but her path was her own. Her dark hair was tied back, revealing sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to reflect the boundless curiosity within her. Around her, the crew bustled with quiet energy, a diverse group of humans and aliens, each bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the mission. Lyra's gaze swept over the bridge, taking in the sight of her crew working together in perfect harmony. Beside her, First Officer Jorath, a towering feline-like being with golden fur and a deep, rumbling voice, reviewed the ship's systems. At the navigation console, Tessa, a diminutive insectoid with iridescent wings, chirped softly as she plotted their course. Lyra took a deep breath, her voice steady as she addressed the crew. "This is more than a mission," she said, her words carrying the weight of her conviction. "This is a journey into the unknown. A chance to discover new worlds, new civilizations, and new possibilities." She paused, her gaze distant as she looked out at the stars. The galaxy has been scarred by war and division. But today, we take a step toward healing. The stars belong to all of us, and it's our duty to explore them not as conquerors, but as friends. The crew listened in silence, their expressions a mixture of pride and anticipation. Each of them had their own reasons for being here, some seeking redemption, others adventure, and still others the chance to build something greater than themselves. Lyra's voice softened, but her determination remained. "Let's see what's out there," she said, her words carrying a quiet sense of wonder. As the Eclipse prepared to launch, a message was broadcast across the galaxy. It was simple, yet profound, a declaration of the galaxy's new era. The era of conquest is over. The era of unity has begun. With a hum of energy, the Eclipse surged forward, its engines propelling it into the unknown. The stars seemed to shimmer as the ship disappeared into the void, its destination uncharted and its purpose clear. And as the galaxy watched, a sense of hope took root, a hope that the future would be defined not by fear and oppression, but by exploration, understanding, and unity. The Eclipse was more than a ship, it was a promise. A promise that the galaxy's greatest stories were still waiting to be written, beyond the horizon.